Welcome. My name is Eliza Starbuck Barney, and I'm delighted to introduce you to some extraordinary Nantucket women. They were intelligent, educated, passionate, and brave. They took on difficult issues involving anti-slavery, women's rights and suffrage, and times of war. And despite obstacles, they each assumed roles and attitudes that were not necessarily the norm for women of their time. You can meet each of them, and they'll tell you in their own words about their own remarkable lives and the people they knew who inspired them.
Oh dear, what's happening? Hello. Oh, here I am. I'm Charlotte Baxter Starbuck. I lived on Nantucket to the age of 75, but I'm delighted to return today as I looked in my youth. I loved literature and writing poetry throughout my life and was drawn to the stories and legends of the Wampanoags who came to Nantucket centuries ago. I was just 23 when I wrote one of my favorite poems, The Legend of Wawinnet. In truth, it's not all legend. The Wampanoags in this story really lived on Nantucket in the 1600s. There are documents that confirm this is so. Wawinnet was the aging but much respected sachem or chief of the Eastern Territories. Wonoma was his cherished daughter, well known as a healer, with great knowledge of medicinal plants and their healing powers. A Tobscot was the young sachem of the Western people. There were wars over hunting grounds among the tribes, and despite all, a Tobscot and Wonoma did marry, and they had a son. Oh dear, I gave away the happy ending. But let me go back and unfold the romantic legend that grew around this true story. Despite the unrest between the tribes, when the Western people contracted a terrible sickness that threatened their survival, they sent for Wonoma, knowing of her healing powers. She did not hesitate to come and help, and indeed saved the tribe. There she met a Tobscot, and they fell in love. Not long after she returned home, she learned of war plans to attack the Western people in retaliation for their encroaching on the Eastern hunting grounds. Alarmed that her love would be harmed, Wonoma secretly set out on a mission to alert him. In my mind's eye, here's how I envisioned that night. When her people all were sleeping, forth she stole from out her wigwam. To the water quickly sped she, launched her boat, and in the darkness, rowed with greatest skill and caution toward the people she was saving. Very dark the night seemed to her, and she prayed the mighty Father that he would in safety guide her to the people she was saving. Then, as if her prayer were answered, slowly up from out the waters rose the moon in all its beauty, giving light unto her pathway, to her heart the needed courage. So forewarned by his love, when the tribes met, instead of battle, a Tobscot faced Wawinnet and made a plea for peace. Here's what I imagined he said. Hear me speak, O mighty Father, for the love I bear Wonoma, for the love she bears her father. She, it was who gave me warning, told me of your plan to conquer. O my Father, O most noble, for the love we both bear Wonoma, for the sake of both our people, may there not be peace between us. So not only did Wawinnet and a Tobscot make a pledge of peace, they agreed to unite their people with a marriage. Old Wawinnet gave his daughter, gave the dearest of his treasures, to the young and brave a Tobscot. So inspiring. Wonoma, a noble and extraordinary Nantucket woman from early days, helped avert conflict and unite the Wampanoag people on Nantucket. I hope you were as moved as I by this story of love and courage. I'm so happy I could relate it once again.
Oh, good day. It's been such a long time since I've seen Nantucket, and you all look so very different than I remember. I'm Mary Coffin Starbuck. I was also known as Great Mary in my day. If you'll indulge me for a moment or two, I'd like to tell you my story and how that name came to be. It all begins with my father, Tristram Coffin. He's well known for buying Nantucket. He led 11 other men in searching for a tolerant and safe haven from the frightful and harsh persecutions by the Puritans in Massachusetts Bay Colony. They found Nantucket to be such a haven, and they bought it. And so at 15 years of age, I came to Nantucket with my family, where we became the first English settlers among the Wampanoag, who had come here centuries before. I was the last born in my family, but saw my life on this gentle island become a series of firsts. I was the first English woman married on Nantucket, married to my childhood sweetheart, Nathaniel Starbuck. Our daughter, Mary, was the first English child born on Nantucket. Nathaniel and I started the first general store. We were able to supply most of the essential needs for the islanders. I was an educated woman, quite remarkable for my time, if I might say so, with great humility. That prepared me to run the business and keep the books. I even became the voice for our family. But whenever we had a town meeting, I was always careful to say, "My husband and I think," before stating my opinion. And so I came to know everyone on the island, the native Wampanoag as well as the English settlers, as they all returned to us for supplies. Over time, many began coming to me for advice and to help them with letters. As they came to value my counsel and guidance in their affairs, I earned the respected name of Great Mary. Over the years, more English settled on Nantucket with varying beliefs, but only the Wampanoag had an organized gathering place. They called it a praying church. There was no organized church for the English. So I invited John Richardson, a Quaker from off island, to speak to a group of settlers at our home. Because Nathaniel and I were thought of as influential people, a huge crowd appeared, and we had to remove the sashes from our windows so people standing outside could hear. Many were astonished by Mr. Richardson's passionate words. He told us that we should turn inward to our hearts, where we would find the truth, our inner light, and that light should guide how we live our lives. He told us that exterior does not matter, that we should live simply in dress and in our homes without distraction by adornments. He told us we should come together in silent worship. We didn't need clergy or liturgy. Instead, if any man or woman be moved by spirit to speak, he or she should stand and share those thoughts and then recede into silence. I became quite emotional. I started to weep and was moved to stand up and say, "All that ever we have been building and all that ever we have done is all pulled down this day, and this is the overwhelming truth." From that day forward, I became a Quaker, and many of those present followed. We Quakers were the first religious group to formally organize on Nantucket as the Society of Friends. Nathaniel and I led that group, and I served as the first woman elder. One last first that occurred to me near the end of my days made me most proud. Our Nantucket Quaker Meeting House was the first in the world to declare the immorality of slavery. And so now it is time for me to depart. But I leave you with my hope that this Nantucket community will continue to be a place where a woman such as I, great Mary can attain leadership and have a voice.
Where am I? This feels like Nantucket, but you don't look like the Nantucket people I knew. No matter. I'm Kezia Coffin, Kezia Folger Coffin, and I'm glad you're here so I can set the record straight about the role I played during the American Rebellion against the British. I was known as notorious, suspected of conducting questionable business practices, called a pirate merchant, even a traitor. In truth, I was a very capable businesswoman. However, I was a royalist. God save George the King. But quite unfortunately and unfairly, being on the losing side of the American Revolution did not bode well for my reputation. Here's how it all came about. My husband, John Coffin, was a whaling man. Consequently, I was left at home, along with the other whaling wives, to help make ends meet and bring up the children. So I opened a shop selling household goods. With the growing responsibilities of building a business and John being away at sea so often, we only had time to have one child, a daughter, Kezia, while my sisters and friends were having 6 or 7 or more. Our house, a mansion, some called it, was on Center Street, and my shop was next door. My business became so successful that my prowess was acknowledged by noted travel writer Mr. John de Crevecoeur as an example of the good wife and a superior woman. He wrote, and I quote, "The richest person now in the island owes all of his present prosperity and success to the ingenuity of his wife. This is a known fact which is well recorded, for while he was performing his first cruises, she traded with pins and needles and kept a school." My husband so trusted me that he granted me power of attorney, enabling me to expand my inventory to include a wide selection of merchandise, not just pins and needles. And that let me branch out into buying and selling properties and opening more shops and lending money to those who suffered from hard times due to the raging war on the mainland. I also had the distinct advantage of being Benjamin Franklin's cousin. With his introduction, I became the only representative from the colonies for a leading London trading house. And yes, through these connections, I did work with the British, but to secure goods for the island that were not otherwise obtainable. Naturally, my costs were higher, so I felt justified in charging more. What prudent business person would not? But this only brought rancor against me from my neighbors. It didn't help that I was disowned by the Quakers for buying a piano for our home so that my daughter could learn to play. Shocking. My daughter was later disowned for marrying a Presbyterian. Oh, scandalous. Worse still were the most colorful suspicions that I managed a lucrative smuggling operation out of our country home in Quays involving tunnels and deliveries by small boats under cover of darkness, and that we hid contraband liquor, dry goods, and other necessities under the house. But that was not true, and no one can prove otherwise. Nonetheless, after the war, I was put on trial as a traitor and abettor to the British, along with other wealthy Nantucket men, including William Roach and my cousin Timothy Folger. If found guilty, the punishment was death. Fortunately, my Presbyterian son-in-law, Phineas Fanning, was a fine lawyer. He defended me, and the case was dismissed for lack of evidence. After the war, our business dissipated when trade opened up. John and I were relentlessly pursued by creditors. Our house and goods were seized. John left quietly, but I was infuriated and I refused to leave my home. They had to forcibly carry me out in my chair. At least I kept the chair. One momentary bright spot was learning that the British government was paying damages for property loss during the war. I had to travel all the way to Nova Scotia to file my claim in hope for some recompense for my efforts to keep my neighbors fed and supplied. But I failed. Instead, I fell ill and found myself in a Halifax debtor's prison. John died in 1788 before I could return to Nantucket. 10 years later, I had a very bad fall down our cellar steps, and I never recovered, and I left this earth after 75 years, leaving $18, a bit of clothing, a Bible, a chamber pot, and my chair. But I still have hope that my good name will be restored. My dear daughter Kezia was a keen and meticulous observer of the events of the day, both trivial and momentous. She wrote in little diaries every day. There were nearly 50 of them, but they've been misplaced. I believe there's proof in those diaries of my good deeds and intentions. Perhaps one of you will find them for me and polish the tarnish from my reputation.
Oh, hello. Hello. It's so nice to be back on Nantucket, albeit looking a little flimsy. I'm Eliza Starbuck, Barney. It appears that I am best known for creating a genealogy of Nantucket. Oddly, I didn't create the record. It was actually created in the mind of a peculiar yet brilliant Sconset hermit, Mr. Benjamin Franklin Folger, who refused to commit any of his vast historical knowledge to paper. Near the end of his life, he finally agreed to let me and other friends write things down. And with these documents that he bequeathed to me, I recorded a permanent genealogy of every white Nantucket family through the late 1800s. I believe many people still find this useful. But this was an endeavor I took on at the end of my life. It was not my life's passion. In my day, there were many critical and stormy issues, and I was in the midst of them all. In truth, I was an agitator. I agitated for an end to slavery, for education reform, for a woman's right to vote, wherever I saw injustice or inequality. Well, this isn't surprising, considering my Quaker upbringing. And I was fortunate that my parents believed that girls should have the same schooling as boys. So I was well educated, particularly fond of the natural sciences, agriculture, and history. I became a recognized botanist and entomologist. Insects, most fascinating. In my teen years, I met Nathaniel Barney, 10 years my senior. Another well-educated Quaker, albeit a liberal one with a good business sense. We were an intellectual match and a happy one. And so we married. My sister Eunice married Nathaniel's business partner, William Hadwin, and the four of us happily shared a double house at 100 Main Street. William and Nathaniel started a very lucrative business in processing whale oil and making candles at our home. Our household became even happier when William and Nathaniel could afford to move the smoke and the smell from our backyard to a spot near the harbor. But it was not his business sense that bound Nathaniel and me together. It was our like minds on the issues of the day. We were ardent abolitionists, helping to establish the Anti-Slavery Society on Nantucket and organizing gatherings. The brightest figures in the movement were invited to our parlor. Mr. William Lloyd Garrison, Mr. Frederick Douglass, and Mr. Horace Mann. And the list includes Nathaniel. I was so proud of him when he refused his New Bedford Railroad stock dividends because the railroad would not carry colored passengers. Eventually, he donated all his dividends to the movement. But pro-slavery feelings also ran high on Nantucket. At our second convention held at the Athenaeum, we were pelted with rotten eggs. Can you imagine? But nothing deterred us in this mission until slavery was abolished and black men were given the right to vote. Well, what about the vote for women? We held back during the fight for abolition, choosing our battles to not endanger this crucial step. Nonetheless, Nathaniel and I were early advocates for women's suffrage, attending the first National Women's Rights Convention at Seneca Falls, where I was honored to meet and serve beside suffrage leader Elizabeth Cady Stanton. Throughout this fight for women's rights, Nathaniel and I were fortunate to have moral support from our Nantucket-born cousin, Lucretia Coffin Mott, and one of America's staunchest advocates for women's suffrage. Through a long and thoughtful correspondence, her consistent passion kept my spirits bolstered. We were also blessed to share this struggle with our dear Nantucket friends. Maria Mitchell, renowned woman astronomer and professor, and the first woman to discover a comet, I might add, who was deeply committed to women's rights. And Anna Gardner, beloved teacher, fellow abolitionist and activist, who gave the most stirring speeches demanding the vote for women. I led the struggle to secure voting rights for island women, and I was proud to be among the first 13 women to vote on Nantucket in 1880. It was only for the school committee, but we were on our way. Over 30 years, I organized meetings and conferences, endorsed endless appeals, and generally agitated for women's suffrage at every opportunity. And so I came to the end of my days with memories of so many individuals I have met who helped make radical changes in America. And for myself, I hope that this is how history will remember me, as a dedicated and fruitful agitator for equal rights and justice for all.
Well, hello. Am I on Nantucket? It's not as I recall. Oh, my manners. I'm Susan Austin Veeder, the wife of the whale ship captain Charles Veeder. I missed him terribly during his long years at sea, and I yearned to see the world beyond the shores of Nantucket. So I was delighted when he invited me to join him on a voyage to the South Pacific in pursuit of sperm whales. During the voyage, I kept a journal of what I saw and experienced along the way, illustrating it with my watercolors. Let me tell you about my adventures. We departed in 1848 on the ship Nauticon and were gone for 4 years. We took our eldest and youngest sons with us. leaving our second boy at home, a difficult decision for me. When we left, I was 5 months pregnant. The worst part was rounding Cape Horn. Many a ship was lost here, and the Nauticon was battered by heavy winds and high seas. I think that if I could have gone on shore, I should have given up the voyage, for I was very sick. The captain is all attention and says he is very happy I am here and encourages me by saying that I get along first rate. I recovered as we made it into the South Pacific. It was in Chile that my baby, Mary Frances, was born. She was a fine child, but not meant to survive the voyage, as she died 13 months later in Tahiti. A great sadness to bear. We placed her body in a lead coffin to bring her home when our voyage was over. But all was not sadness. My living conditions on board were quite fine. The captain and I had 2 rooms, a bedroom, and a living room, which became a dining room in the evenings, where we enjoyed meals with the officers. We ate well. We traded for food in local villages, and with ships we met along the way. We enjoyed exotic fruits and vegetables I had never tasted before. We had fish and fowl. Meat from tortoises we collected in the Galapagos Islands was a staple. And all this food was washed down by delicious Madeira wine. We even had livestock on board, pigs, goats, and chickens. Some of the animals became like pets to us, and it was very sad to kill them for food. But we had to eat. My husband also taught me celestial navigation so I could help navigate the ship. I appreciated the hard life the crew endured and took pains to ease their days. I baked for them gingerbread and donuts I fried in whale oil. Yes, indeed. As there were no doctors aboard, I nursed their wounds and was a teacher and tutor to some of the men who couldn't read or write. In exchange, the crew was very kind to our eldest son, mentoring him and making him a fine seaman. I have many unforgettable memories of this voyage. We witnessed the eruption of a volcano in the Galapagos Islands. The captain treated me to laundry days on a quiet, secluded beach on Cocos Island, away from the damp ship air that made laundry so difficult. We detoured to Pitcairn Island so we could visit with the descendants of Fletcher Christian and the other mutineers from the Bounty. We had not been at the house of Mr. Christian many minutes before the house was full. Everyone in the place had come to see me. I think they are the kindest people I have ever met. Toward the end of our voyage, we found ourselves stuck in the Arctic ice for 13 days, our food and fuel running out. I never thought I would see my home again. We did break through that ice, thank the Lord, and finally turned homeward. We arrived on Nantucket in March of 1853 to a grand reception, our friends and family waiting at the dock. I hardly recognized our young son. He was a boy when we left, but he had grown into a man. I never went whaling again. My husband returned to the sea for 2 more voyages. Between the 2, in 1860, we were blessed with the birth of another daughter, Mariana, my joy. But Charles did not return from the second voyage. I received word of his death many years later. The sea also claimed my 2 younger sons, too common a sadness of whaling wives. I spent the rest of my days on Nantucket, raising my family and counting my blessings. As whaling was declining, the town fathers considered a new livelihood they called tourism. So, just as did my neighbors, I opened my doors, offering genteel accommodations on our beautiful historic island to summer tourists. I do wonder if this notion will take hold. Tourism.
Oh, my apologies. I didn't see you there. Greetings. I'm Anna Gardner, and I'd like to tell you of the momentous struggles I witnessed in my 85 years on this good earth. They shaped my life, a life I chose to devote to fighting for the rights and education of all people, most urgently for blacks and women. The first and most profound lesson came at the young age of 6. A Mr. Arthur Cooper, an escaped slave, had come to Nantucket to begin a new life, when one day bounty hunters arrived on the island to find him and return him and his family to his owners. My parents, ardent Quakers and abolitionists, joined both black and white Nantucket neighbors in hiding Mr. Cooper until the hunters gave up the chase. He and his family hid in our home for several weeks until it was finally safe to join the community again. Mr. Cooper went on to become a prominent member of the black community and a church leader in the years to follow. I was deeply moved by my parents' courage and sense of justice, inspiring me later in my teen years to be the first white woman on Nantucket to subscribe to the national abolitionist newspaper, The Liberator, and to become involved in the movement. More on that later. I had an insatiable appetite for learning, and my parents saw to it that I was well educated. And so I became passionate about sharing knowledge with others, even opening my own private school at the age of 15, before later accepting a teaching position at the African school, where I had 50 black students in my one-room classroom and taught all levels up to the 9th grade. When it came time for my star pupil, Miss Eunice Ross, to advance, she was denied admission to the Nantucket High School because of her race. I resigned that year in protest, but I was so very proud of Eunice, who later added her voice to petitions sent to the Massachusetts State Legislature in support of equal rights for all Nantucket children. I can still hear her voice.
The undersigned respectfully requests that the petition of E.J. Pompey and others may be granted. The undersigned has good reason to feel on this subject, as she was examined in 1840 by the school committee and found amply qualified for admission into the high school at Nantucket, but was refused admittance by a vote of the town on account of her color. Eunice Ross.
And after a long and vexing debate, in 1845, the state finally passed legislation ensuring equal access to education for all. But my dear Eunice, she chose not to attend high school at this time, perhaps because she was already 24 by then. So after I left the school, I threw myself into the work of the Nantucket Anti-Slavery Society. The controversy over the plight of Eunice Ross had caught the attention of Massachusetts society. In response, I organized the Nantucket's first anti-slavery convention. Here I made the acquaintance of a young Mr. Frederick Douglass. I heard him give his first public speech to a mixed audience of whites and blacks. I was so inspired by his words and his commitment. And one of the dearest blessings of my life was his continued friendship and correspondence with me throughout the rest of his life. Then, as our nation's civil war intensified, I was drawn back to teaching and was among the first to volunteer for the Freedmen's Commission to teach freed slaves in the South. Both children and adults were hungry for knowledge by this time, making it tolerable to endure the hostile environment, the poorly equipped schoolrooms, and difficult living arrangements. I taught in schools for blacks only in the Carolinas and Virginia over 11 years. So proud of my students, but so concerned for their futures. Many of my scholars became teachers themselves, giving me hope that they would teach others, and that equitable education for all could someday become a reality. Eventually, upon my return to Nantucket, I joined the battle for women's rights to vote. During the 1876 centennial, my friend and colleague, Professor Mariah Mitchell, presided at the 4th Women's Congress in Philadelphia, and she asked me to speak on the topic of women's suffrage. Lit with the passion for this fundamental right, I spoke forcefully, calling for the vote. Women's suffrage, the most advanced reform of the age, will surely be fulfilled. There will come a time when men's and women's roles are interchangeable. Men may say that women are not ready for such weighty responsibility, but I maintain that the ballot is the best preparation for the ballot, and that suffrage is the keystone of all other rights. In time, women will simply not be denied. I did not, however, see this in my lifetime. But now, I am gratified to know that American women won the right to vote, and that my efforts, along with my courageous sisters, were not in vain.